All right, welcome everybody. I think we'll just wait another moment. So this talk is from a book that I'm writing on the work that I'm doing in psychedelic therapy. And Amber, are people allowed to type things in? Because I'd like to have some call and response going on. Okay. Only Q&A. Okay. We'll get there then at the end. All right, so this talk again comes from the work I do as a psychedelic assisted therapist. I'm a clinical psychologist as well, and I merge the non-dual teachings, Buddhist Dharma, meditation, mindfulness, and depth psychology with psychedelic assisted therapy. And in the States, I use ketamine, which I do at a clinic. And then out of the country, I run retreats for mostly combat veterans and using other medicines. And so I want to present on not particularly the medicine itself, but truth as medicine, because what I've discovered in all the years I've been doing this and all the work I'm doing at the ketamine clinic with patients is that the truth itself is liberating. Not necessarily the medicine, but when people allow themselves to finally speak their own truth, the deeper truth, the things that have held them back, the things that they haven't wanted to say. Some of the work around the truth, and this one, the capital T, that might be the mystical truths, perhaps of the cosmos, the mystical truths of oneness, the non-dual truths we might experience, the truth of interdependence. All of these are truths we might experience under the non-ordinary states of consciousness or psychedelic states. But the truth that I'm speaking about is really more on a psyche level and an individual level. So I'm going to give you a couple examples of what truth might sound like and why that it's so liberating. So again, for those of you joining, I'm speaking about truth as medicine, that psychedelic therapy often leads us to authenticity within ourselves. And how I'm describing it today is looking at the idea of truth rather than the medicine itself. And so I'll give you a couple case studies. I was working with a daughter of a police officer. She's an adult at this point, and she goes, most of the time I'm frightened to be anywhere in public, and I always have this impending sense of doom coming, which sounds quite like PTSD for most of us who have PTSD, that sense of not being safe, of danger. And so when we finally, in psychedelic therapy, worked our way down, traced that sense of fear, she told me that as a child, her and her sister were trained by her parents to avoid kidnapping. Her father, who was a police officer, had seen enough incidents with children that he became extraordinarily hypervigilant and trained his daughters to guard against being kidnapped, which means that they did actual live simulations. And so she, as a young girl, would often be extraordinarily frightened. In order to protect herself, she would have to, her training was to be frightened. And so she didn't realize that this was the source. And when she was finally able to identify that and then start speaking out about it, how that scared she was doing that, how disconnected she felt from her parents who were insisting on that route of safety, she started to feel a sense of the burden she was carrying, protecting her parents, let go. So it's not just making context and connection between your state now and what you experienced in the past, which is it, but it's also bringing love from the present back to that girl she experienced herself being, and bringing a robust sense of love to herself, and also letting herself speak her truth, which was, this is not okay for me. I do not want to practice these things. I'm scared and overwhelmed doing this. So that's one example. Another example was a woman who had had an affair 9 years ago. And for 9 years, her husband recorded her at home, put a tracking device on the car, was monitoring bank statements just to keep an eye on her, is what she said. And she came to me at the end of her rope and didn't know what else to do. She felt depressed, isolated. And so when we were exploring the affair and the results of that affair, I asked her, have you ever told your husband, no, you can't do those things? And she looked super shocked. And she's like, I didn't know I could say that to him. I said, oh my gosh, how about agency and autonomy? She goes, I don't believe I deserve it. I said, who taught you that? Where did you learn that? And we traced it all the way back to her relationship to her mother. And her mother would often demand things like, come back from college, I need this, I need that. And she would often do whatever her mother wanted. Her truth finally came out that she allowed herself to be diminished in her self concept, where she would allow anybody to do anything. And so then she finally discovered her truth was, I have worth regardless of what I've done. And if I say no, I'm not a bad person. So she had to discover this truth for herself. It took 3 ketamine sessions. In 9 years, she never challenged her husband. And then after 3 ketamine sessions, speaking her truth, which is, I have worth, I will not be treated this way. No matter what I've done, I don't deserve to be punished. She ended up separating from her husband and making a whole new set of choices for herself because she was allowed to speak the truth. So what I'm finding in my work in ketamine therapy and other psychedelic assisted therapies is that what the medicine allows us to do is track ourselves down to our past. It always really does come down to our core wounds and our conditioning and our patterns and our habits that we formed very early on, bringing love to that part of us that was severely wounded psychically or physically. So here we are traveling in time backward. We're finding the source of and the sources of our deepest wounds, and then allowing ourselves to speak our truth, which is, that was not okay. I was not okay with this, or I actually hated what my mother did. And in fact, I might hate my mother. People come in all the time saying things like, my parents were good people. And I'm like, oh, ugh, that's a, right there gives me a sense of they're defending somebody. Now, their parents might be amazing people. It's not my job to criticize and judge the parents. It's my job to help the person get to their fundamental truth. And once that fundamental truth is spoken, we have freedom. We have deep, long-lasting freedom because we're finally saying the thing we needed to say, and we always needed to say, we have not allowed ourselves to say. So psychedelic medicines diffuse some of the anxiety and tension in our bodies, like ketamine helps us stay relaxed, but it also exposes us to our core wounds and our core beliefs. And then it allows us the freedom and courage to say what we've always needed to say. And that changes us dramatically, having the space and the courage to speak our truths. I believe we're nearing the end of my 10-minute talk. Normally I do this for an hour and I'll engage with all of you, but I can't even see you right now. So I'm just hoping you're thinking about your own truths. What haven't I spoken aloud? And we're so afraid to say things like, I hate and I'm so angry. But the truth is, if your psyche actually is feeling those things, but they're not being addressed, then we ourselves are keeping ourselves entrapped because we're defending and we're not allowing for truth to be spoken about or exposed. So this is one way that I use psychedelic therapy to help people recognize, bring forward, expose, and then share their own personal truths. So I think we're at Q&A time. Okay, so I think I'm reading these. How do you lead someone who has blocked much of their childhood subconscious mind back to these sources? Is it just the drug that breaks down the resistance? It's a combination of willingness and the drug. The drug often reduces the ego's defenses because the ego drops in and out of experience. The ego might be staunchly defended normally, but when you're on ketamine, you're in and out of normal consciousness or MDMA or psilocybin, And so the ego can't actually stay as a whole structure. It dissolves over and over again. It reemerges and dissolves. So then when I'm there doing therapy and I'm asking these deep questions, where does that come from? Where does that come from? And we keep finding the thread down to the heart. The person's own wisdom and me as the therapist is working together to help them access things from their childhood it is always there for us, but that we're usually consciously or unconsciously blocking. So yes, the drug helps dissolve the ego so it doesn't have the strong hold. That way we can do the deeper work. I hope that's a good answer. I recently had a guided session with MDMA and came to my own mantra: I want to not worry about others. It is still true for me and very, very powerful for me moving through my pain. Yes, I want not to worry about others. I would actually work on a phrase that might also, I want to tend to myself. So maybe even make a mantra that is more for you. What do you most want for yourself? Do you want tending, compassion? Do you want to be a loving witness of yourself? How could you move that mantra from even focusing on others to starting to focus on self? I am my own loving attendant. I am my own loving witness. I care what I feel and think. This might be more active than thinking about others. To get away from others, I would start concentrating on the truth of what I want the most for myself. And your heart knows. I wonder if there are any more questions. You're welcome, Sky. This is very quick, 10-minute session, which I normally, again, lead for an hour or more, and I'll be writing a book on this subject too. Please, any questions you have around the idea of truth, and of course, we didn't touch on the mystical truths. We're touching on our own personal deep truth that we want to emerge and be shared and witnessed. It is so empowering to be able to share your own truth with yourself and others. Is there a bottom layer to who we are? In my practice, it's unconditional love. The fabric of reality for me tends to be unconditional love. It's a field of love that radiates, that permeates. And it exists throughout time, backward and forward. That's why Julia and I's work, we extend love in all directions. We go back and we connect. We see our original nature is love and goodness, and our forward nature is love and goodness. Is there a method we can contact you, social media or otherwise? Yeah, I think through there. I think there's a bio on this, and maybe Amber can put my website, michaelsapiro.com. Um, Happy to share, and hopefully in a year a book will come out with Truth is Medicine. What else? Do you have any thoughts about truth? Oh, here's one. Lucid about time and love and healing. Your emphasis on the truth. Your heart knows, as you say, and it's so good to see and hear you. Good to see you too, Jeff. Yes. So this work is about truth, your own deepest truth, coming in contact with it, feeling the resonance of truth in your body and learning to speak it very clearly, concisely. And then you'll start creating healthy boundaries for yourself. That's not okay for me. I prefer this. These are kinds of examples of where your truth starts coming out in real life. Any last thoughts or questions? I know it was a lot at once, but I hope it was worthwhile to come into the session to think about your truth, what wants to be exposed, explored. Awesome. Thank you for that feedback. I wanted to be succinct in 10 minutes. And I think that's our session. So thank you, everybody. Go find who you are, the deepest truth, and speak it, live it. Thank you.